I wanted to address the second part of the question, which was self-driving cars, in the
Yes.
context of Formula Student, which you have been a part of before. Now, as you might be aware or might not be aware, Formula Student Germany is completely shifting to a driverless domain. So they're phasing out the combustion side, bringing in the EV side, and then phasing out driving cars completely. And after a certain point, they're going to completely shift to a driverless domain. There are mixed feelings regarding this. Does a race car have to be driverless? What does this achieve? Do you need to phase out combustion vehicles so soon? Even if you're phasing out combustion vehicles, then why are they shifting to a driverless domain? And some events have not chosen to go this route. I'd love to hear your opinions or your take on
Yeah.
this. Was this the
So
right decision? What do you think?
I think it's a great point that you bring up, and it's super relevant to what Pravega Racing and other teams are doing. But first, I would like to preface it with one point, which is that it depends of how you conceive FSA. I believe that FSA is an engineering design competition. It's it is race car is a product where it's at the end of the day, it's about university students working on a practical problem, a challenge, an engineering problem, and solving it and testing it and competing around it. And race car is just one of those things. So when, for instance, FSG decides to move driverless, I believe that their motivation is to to complicate that challenge, to bring that challenge closer to what they see is happening in the world. So it's not per se about race cars. I mean, I don't know if there are statistics available as to how many people who are working in Formula SAE teams across the world actually go and start working
Not much.
to build race cars. Yeah.
Not much.
So, but at the same time, as you and Tribhuvan were actually talking in the last podcast, it's it's a lot of other things that you learn. Building the race car and the technology with the powertrain, vehicle dynamics, and the carbon fiber work. Yes, that those are like the knowledge, skills. Some in some cases that one learns, but it's a lot of other things that also happen in Formula Student. So coming to the point about driverless cars, I would believe that it's a great idea to look at the next kind of technology frontier in the automotive industry, where the industry is moving to. I don't remember very well, but uh, I think with the whole, you have to also contextualize it in the broader global scenario of what what I mean, what are the sustainable development goals that the world has? Is this engineering design competition helping people being more aware of this, the problems associated with emissions, and that's how they moved to electric cars, right? A few years ago, because now electric cars are becoming a reality in a lot of places, and maybe in the future we will see government saying, okay, we live in the city of Paris, there is a lot of pollution, we need quality of life, we need to turn by 2030, 2040, I don't know. All cars allowed in Paris would be electric cars. And this happens. For instance, in Delhi, you cannot have a car, I think a diesel car or a petrol car, uh, which is older than 10 years, because they want to phase those out because they want pollution to be controlled. And I'm sure there is a big automotive lobby also behind that, not discounting that. But so you see, this affects, there's a whole broader system within which our engineering design competition is anchored. Now, when we talk about going driverless, I think this is where technology is moving. Uh, it's important for students to be challenged. From what I see Pravega Racing, I think it's become much more easier to design a combustion car now that we have. In 2013, when we were designing a car, we didn't have a running car before. You know, in 2012, we had the car, we had two cars, we saw two cars. But to make the 2013 car, we had to take off the things from the previous cars and then build a new car. So we didn't have two engines, we didn't have those resources. But when future teams, I think they had the chance to see a running car and then have a new car. And now the kind of, you would see, I mean, the design and the advanced level of engineering that the team does now versus what we did before, there's a huge progress. Then what is the next frontier? How will the future engineers coming out of VIT would be challenged? How relevant would their skills be when they join the industry? I think these questions, if FSG is doing that, it's great. On the question of whether driverless cars are needed, whether there are some problems, whether there is yes, there are those issues. For instance, this very often talked about experiment of what will you do, the trolley problem, as we say, if someone is outside and whether you will kill people inside, outside. Those are ethical and philosophical concerns. And this is where I think engineers also need to be more involved because at the end of the day, when you design a car, you are imbuing it with a script. You tell it what to do. When you write the algorithm, it takes the feedback and then it's not that it's a rigid algorithm where you put, okay, if this happens, it is a lot more dynamic and autonomous. But the objective function of the algorithm is something that you decide as an engineer. And so you need to be alive to these concerns. So just to point out, I think a few years ago, MIT did a survey on what are people's attitudes towards driverless cars. I think that is an interesting survey to look at. And how people are comfortable, what would they do if, addressing some of these trolley problem situations. Just to highlight, trolley problem is when you decide you are the one who will control whether people inside the trolley would die or people on a railway track would die. And that can change whether someone who's inside the trolley is much older versus an 18-year-old kid who's on the track. And then you are the one who has to choose between the life of one of those. How do you do that? I don't know. We have not really faced this kind of life and death decisions to be taken in such an explicit manner before. So that makes it more complicated and that requires more research. And I think for your business plan and all those things, if the team kind of addresses these questions, I think that would be quite interesting.
I think what you just said dovetails very well with what you said earlier about policy making for AI. Because when you spoke about the gap between the technology bit and the policy making bit, I was wondering what would be the drawbacks of having the people who are actually experts, the AI researchers, making policies, and the issue which you just brought about, the ethical aspects, the philosophical aspects. I think that sort of partially answers why that wouldn't sort of work. So can we go into that? My question is,
yeah.
What do you think would happen if the professionals, the engineers, were in policy making? So you bridge the gap. What I'm asking is, what if that gap didn't exist and the policy making power was entirely with the technologists?
So I think what we have to understand is that the policy making process is a multi-stakeholder process. So what we mean when we say multi-stakeholder is, as an engineer, someone has their comparative advantage is to be an engineer, to have that engineering perspective, to have an understanding of technology, of how it is designed. And they may face some challenges. As a policymaker, and I would say, for instance, a politician, your advantage is that you are deciding for the whole society. You have understanding of what people want and how you can deliver those promises. And in essence, what you are pointing out is a debate between having technocrats and politicians versus technocrats. So, for instance, tomorrow, if you say that let's do this simple experiment. We say that tomorrow, the government of India, we don't have a prime minister who is a politician, but we have a CEO. For instance, let's bring in Nandan Nilekani, as they did for designing Aadhaar. Nandan Nilekani is going to run the country. He comes from a business background, technology background. with his own skill set, but he's not a politician. Uh, for instance, you actually saw Nandan Nilekani fought elections in Bangalore, and in the end, if you listen to some of his interviews, he says, "This was not my skill set. My skill set is working on technology, scaling up things, being innovative, a lot of those things. But being in politics is not really my skill set." So you require so when you say that we can have engineers just making policy, yes, there are a lot of engineers in policy making spaces, uh, and they can be politicians. But I don't see it that because someone has technical expertise, one can directly transpose that to a more political space, because the skill sets required are very different. And this would also mean that we are saying, oh, politicians basically they don't have any skill set other than just talking and not doing anything. That's not true. Uh, so that's where the idea of being multi-stakeholder comes in. That when you take a decision, for instance, tomorrow, when if India is going to work on a legislation for a driverless car or some kind of regulation, at that moment, you need lawyers, you need politicians who would understand what, decide what the country, what direction it has to take. You need urban planners, you need engineers who are working on the technology, you need philosophers, you need, for instance, a lot of, you need economists, you need private sector uh, firms who make these cars. You need all these people to come together and discuss and then decide and then reach a consensus. Okay, this is what is our interest and this is how it should be. These would be the repercussions as we can see going forward, and we need to address them. So i i am a bit, and there is a big literature about, there's a lot of critique about technocrats coming. And for instance, you have the office of the chief economic advisor in the government of India is basically a career economist who comes and designs and supports economic policy making. Now, this is a technocrat. This is not a politician. That person will come and will design, will give inputs for economic policy making. But that person may not have a very grassroots level understanding of what people want and what is happening in the ground, in the cities, in the villages, in people's homes, as much as a politician does. But that person has his or her own skill set, which is of value as well. And then there is often a criticism that we are making too many technocrats are taking decision and they sit in their ivory towers, far away from where the things are implemented. They are engrossed in academic debates and things like that, and then they decide. And this is far removed from the reality. Uh, One of the critiques of actually the Aadhaar system is also that a lot of researchers, activists who work in villages and towns on, say, public distribution system are saying, yes, we have this biometric technology, you put your thumbprint, but sometimes it doesn't work. People can have starvation related deaths, and there's a lot of documentation on that. People don't get their food grains on time. Now, this is exactly the kind of situation where you need all these people to work together, because you are bringing technology in delivery of public service, and there are consequences of that. You cannot have a technocrat just sitting and deciding that,
Okay.
because we just don't know.
Correct. I mean, that makes,
we need more people.
yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think this sort of transitions very well into what people understand about the engineering sphere and the policy making / politics sphere, because engineering is very objective. You have an input, you have an output, and regardless of what field it is, computer science, mechanical, it's very objective in nature. Whereas the political sort of sphere is more nuanced and it's quite vague. And when you say that I work in policy making or I work in politics, it's quite difficult to understand for someone who's not familiar with it. So I want to talk about how you, as a mechanical engineer from Pravega Racing, got very objective sort of engineer making decisions, this and that. sort of got interested in policy making or politics. We spoke about the LAMP fellowship. Maybe we can sort of get into how you got into that and why you got into that.
So I think there is a difference in how we as engineers sometimes think. It is somewhat analytical, like, okay, step one, step two, step three. There's clear link between what you're doing and then what it is causing, and okay, fits,
Right.
works.
I
No
just like
messing.
to interject and then tell you that's exactly when I asked you initially about, so to explain to me how the sort of the policy making works. What I expected was step one, step two, step three, done. But it's clearly not like that, right?
Yeah. So it's very interesting. I will come in on 2 points here. So this is how when I was studying engineering, I used to write also, and I would think, oh yeah, this is how, very to the point and direct, and not fully appreciative of nuances, I would say. Then then I decided to do this fellowship called the LAMP Fellowship, where which is run by this organization called PRS Legislative Research, which provides non-partisan support to members of parliament in Delhi and also in state legislatures now. And as part of this work, they analyze a lot of legislation, a lot of policies. They develop policy briefs. The idea is to raise the level of information and knowledge available with decision makers, for instance, parliamentarians or state legislatures, uh, on on issues that they're debating. And part of this work is involves sometimes, which is the LAMP Fellowship, is to provide the member of parliament with a legislative assistant, and at the same time give the person who's working as a legislative assistant an inside view of how the parliament really works. What are the pulls and pushes? What is politics intersecting with policy making? Uh, Generally, how the system works, and provide mentorship to this young person who can be from any field. I've joined as an engineer. There are a lot of engineers in the LAMP Fellowship. People from a lot of backgrounds join in. Uh, and that is the idea, to make it also more inclusive and diverse, and not only like people with social sciences background coming in. So that's what the LAMP Fellowship is. I did it because I wanted to know whether my interest in this field is real, or whether I like it or not. Whether I like this field enough, because I was at some point in 2015, 16, 14, I was thinking of, oh, maybe I need to do something else, because my meaning making in life was not really coming from working in an automotive firm. As Pravega, we had done a lot of, we use an electronic ECU. We did a lot of programming kind of things to uh, tune the engine. Those are the things that we were doing. But when I joined a particular firm, it was more like product development with a carburetor, and I was like, no, I don't want. Uh, so that's how I kind of started moving to the other side and started thinking. And I did this fellowship for 1 year, worked with a member of parliament who was. You also learn when you have mentorship of how people at such a senior level, they think and they interact and they manage. And there were a lot of things that I learned just by observing how he deals with his staff, how he deals with his constituency, how he deals with people in the constituency, how he deals with other politicians. I was like, wow, this is kind of an inside view. And basically, I was working from his house in Delhi. So we would have breakfast and we would have lunch sometimes, and we would talk about what are the events of the day, policy. I would prepare some briefings, questions to ask in parliament, debates to prepare, speeches to write, parliamentary standing committees that do their work to scrutinize, and all those things we would prepare. And then also importantly, to link what is happening in the constituency. So he kind of empowered me to directly reach out to the district administration in his constituency to ask them, before any particular important meeting that we had, what are the issues in the constituency that we need to raise. So it was a very dynamic process where what is happening in, say, Andhra Pradesh, we were trying to channelize it directly to the highest levels in Delhi. And that requires someone to work in between who can link both Delhi and the constituency in Andhra Pradesh. Of course, the MP can do that, and MPs do that, but they need a lot of support. I mean, they can't sit and write questions in front of their computers because they have a lot of other things to do. So this is what my role as LAMP at LAMP was, and I think I've digressed a lot and lost what your initial question was.
That's the whole point of the podcast. It's to digress and go off on tangents. So so I found that very interesting when you said that you sort of got to learn a lot from this sort of environment. I'd like to dig deep into that aspect where I think we discussed this earlier on our phone call, where we're talking about how engineers think differently and how politicians sort of think differently. So I want to understand sort of specifics of how you bridge that gap from thinking analytically step 1, step 2, step 3 to having a more open, nuanced outlook on everything. Maybe you can give examples, or
I think we need to clarify something in how we are using the terms. Being a politician doesn't mean that you are not analytical. And being an engineer doesn't mean that you cannot be nuanced. And being nuanced and being analytical are not mutually exclusive. So what we mean when we say as an engineer is a very direct relation between action and the cause and effect. You put if you are calibrating your engine, if your fuel air to fuel ratio is this will lead to this like kind of combustion, and this will lead to this kind of power, and voila, this is clear. In between, most of the factors can be controlled, or you can think for it. In a lot of engineering problems, you can have some kind of margin of error and factor of safety, those kind of things, to account for things where you don't know what has happened. You can use your simulation softwares and say, okay, this is the combustion profile. Okay, this is how my tire is going to react when I turn at this particular speed. Okay. In politics or policy, you can't do that. I mean, there are attempts at simulating things as well, but the factors that are at play are so many that it's hard to do that. And that is why you need, for instance, in economics, there is a lot of focus on linking on evidence. Okay, when you are designing a policy, you need evidence that for instance, let me give you an example. So say, for instance, a very common, often talked about problem is you have malaria, problem of malaria in a particular region. What is the solution that you would use? Should we give safety, the nets to people, and then they will put that and the mosquitoes will not come and bite them? Then if we give them the nets, should we give them for free? Should we charge them something? How should we do that? And whereas when you are a politician, you have to decide, okay, there is a high incidence of malaria in this region. I have X amount of money, say, I don't know, 10 crores for my health budget, 10 crores to spend for welfare to protect a population of, I don't know, maybe 1.5 crore people against malaria. What do I do? Do I spray some kind of insect repellent, or do I do some other solution? It's very complicated. You have to target, you have budget constraints and all those things, which also exist in engineering, budget constraints and all. So then you decide, then economists come in and they say, okay, let's do a trial. We will give some number of people in similar situation a net for free. We will give some number of people a net by charging them some amount, and then let's see how they use it. And then they see, experiment, they do some randomized control trials, what they're called, and they will see, okay, in the case where we charge people a little bit, it worked better. So this evidence, keeping all things same, can probably become a policy, and we charge people, say, 10 rupees. There's a study. I'm just kind of extrapolating. These are not exact information. 10 rupees to charge for this net, and people will use, and the incidence of malaria will go down by 25%. Wow, great achievement, great value for money. But then you use this study and then you do it in, say, Haryana, and then the same study was, then you do it in, say, Kenya, the effect is not the same. Whereas you would think that if you are tuning your engine in Haryana and then you go to Shimla, the altitude is different, I can take account for that, and then rest everything would be same. It would still work. So there are a lot of factors. What is the people's attitude? What is their poverty level? What is their attitude towards government? How strong is the government in influencing, in actually implementing policies, whether they trust them or not? There's host of things. So that's what makes it complicated. And that's why you need a lot of different perspectives. Then a political scientist may come and say, maybe there is a caste dimension to why people are not using it, which needs to be taken into account.
Okay.
So you need, that is what I would say happens in policy making, and why it's complicated and needs a lot of stakeholders to work together. So,
okay. So I think that's very interesting that you mentioned you explained the whole thing with an example, but I would like you to condense what you sort of learned in this LAMP fellowship, if you could do that in sort of maybe a word or a phrase or a few lessons, because I understand how nuanced the whole process is, but I'd like to understand more how you grew as a person holistically and what you learned.
So at the LAMP fellowship, you don't really do all this. You kind of understand those questions, and then you can do some research and find out and make some proposals to your MP, and they can discuss. You don't design these experiments. That's another level of research that happens. So at the LAMP fellowship, I feel that what I learned was, one, knowledge of how policy making is happening in India. What are the key movers and shakers? What are the sources of information that you need to look at? How the process works, and how the process is broken wherever it is broken and wherever it is strong. So just appreciation of that kind of gives you a lot of ground level insight. And then as an engineer, I was like, okay, so my tools as an engineer, the thinking tools, do not really account for this perspective which is coming from social sciences. This perspective which is taking into account how do legal scholars look at a law? How do political scientists look at law? How do constitutional experts look at law? How are they looking at these things? They have their own tools, which I, as an engineer, don't have. And because I was interested in this space and I wanted to work more, I thought it is a good idea at this point to go and learn some of these tools. Go and learn, have some interface with these fields. And that's when I decided to do my studies in public policy, where you essentially learn about economics, political science, law, a host of other things, ethics, and like it's a very interdisciplinary kind of area. So to condense, LAMP was kind of opening up my mind to what happens beyond, engineering and engineering world. And one of the great things about LAMP is that I got to engage with a lot of peers who were other LAMP fellows, who were coming from all these backgrounds. So you do learn from working with the system and the MP, etc. But you do learn a lot from your peers. Someone who's coming from economics background, or whatever background they're from a psychology background, from literature background, they have their own insights. And so I think that kind of, you learn from people, and then you build really great friendships. A lot of LAMP fellows from 2015 we talk, we have our groups, and it's constantly buzzing even now what is happening, and a lot of people are doing great initiatives in India, abroad. So it's all spread out now. So that's also great to engage with all these people. Yeah.
Okay. So for you to go from an engineer to a sort of policymaker, there are obviously many steps along the way. And one of these steps were actually having your own startup. So I'd like you to sort of explain what the startup was about, and because being an entrepreneur, and when you say politician and an entrepreneur, I think this what someone would imagine is quite different. Entrepreneur is sort of more free spirited, does whatever he wants or goes out there and tries things, whereas a politician is more rigid in a system and does things according to the rules. So
I
I'd
don't
like
know which politician do you know who does things according to the rules.
uh,
Uh,
well, ideally speaking.
I would say that politician is as much an entrepreneur as someone who's doing some kind of business.
Okay,
Also
that's
the
a
fact
very
that
interesting
we have
take.
so many that also the fact that you have so many people who are in business as politicians now. But just kidding aside, uh, I think politics is a very dynamic field. You, as a politician, you need to be all the things at the same time. You need to take risks. You need to have that gumption to take risks. You need to be able to sit out and sit through things when you, for instance, you are not in power for 10 years, 20 years, and you need to sit out and you need to continue to do your things. It needs a lot of tenacity, perseverance, uh, and when you are in a position of governing, there is a lot of accountability. So it's a very dynamic, high pressure kind of environment. So I would say that they are as much, if not more, entrepreneurial in their spirit than entrepreneurs who can take account of, okay, this is the balance sheet, this is the intro, this is the theory, and we'll do that. So the startup was basically I had quit the engineering job and I was like, okay, let's see what to do. So with a couple of friends from VIT. So before I saw this article in the Caravan magazine, which was talking about education and how kids in tribal communities in India are sometimes, they have their own languages. They speak their own cultural. There's their own cultural context. They have uh, practices that of their own communities. So, but when these kids they go to the school, they are made to study in the regional language. For instance, if you are a tribal community in Maharashtra speaking a particular language of your own, you would go to school and you would study in, say, Marathi, which you don't have any context of because your community doesn't speak that language much. You talk to your parents in your own language. So when you go to school, you're like, oh, this is something alien to me. I don't understand anything. And the article mentioned some research which says that as a kid, you have 5,000 words or something in your own language by the age of 5 or something like that. To some effect, something like that. And when you go to the school, you may feel excluded and you will not really understand things well because that's not your language. So education as itself becomes a bit distant from you, whereas it should be close to what your own experiences are. So this was the context broadly of that article. And I thought, okay, this is something that I would like to try to address in some ways possible. And I talked to two of my friends from VIT. One was in computer science, one was in ECE. And I said, what do you guys think? Then we came up with the plan. Okay, let's try to reach out to some of these communities or some NGOs which are working with them and see if we can develop content with them, like storybooks in their own language and their own stories. There's no point, I mean, so that education to them is when you are a 5-year-old kid, you see a storybook which has people who dress up like how you dress up in your community, and also have your own stories. So that was our idea, to make education a bit more accessible, a bit more fun, a bit more relatable. So we produced one book for a tribal community in Maharashtra. Also, actually, the illustrator for that book was Arjun. Arjun, he was in the team. He used to work on the design and some of those things with the team.
Wow.
Uh,
Okay.
so he joined us to actually design the book, and we gave the book to the community. They found it interesting, and however, in this whole process, our business model was not really solid. Uh, it's this is a very niche kind of area where you, I mean, you can't expect people to pay for that book a lot, unless it's the government which gets the book and puts it in schools and gives it to the kids. So there has to be a funder attached, because there is not enough resources available for the tribal communities to pay to access this kind of books. And for us, I mean, we could fund, we funded almost all this out of our own pockets at that time, but we could not continue on that model because, well, you have to be able to make it sustainable. So at that point, we kind of lost the game. We were talking to also a community in Arunachal Pradesh, and they were interested. They were talking about how to do this funding, and but then it didn't really. The model was not really working out. So then we kind of stopped at this point. But this is something which I feel is it's kind of close to my heart, and I would like to go back to it.
Okay.
I don't know what is the model and how those things can be figured out. Uh, so I think this was the startup. We did this, and then we kind of all said, okay, this is at this point not working. We need to do something else. Then one of those colleagues, friends, he went on to do another startup, and he's working on that, on tourism industry and things like that. And the other is now in China, and I'm here. So
Okay.
yeah,
Uh,
so that's
so okay, and I think one sort of interesting thing is we haven't, or I can say non-interesting thing is we haven't spoke about Proega racing at all. So, uh, I mean, I'm sort of glad we didn't do that because it would get repetitive. Everyone would say the same thing. I learned this, that, this from Pravega, and it helped me a lot. I mean, we know that, but I'd
yeah.
still, in spite of that, I want to know how the things you learned at Pravega, because you do get to learn a lot of things, how that still helps you in your day-to-day sort of work, so on and so forth. I'm talking about not technical stuff, but life lessons in general.
I think that it is not an understatement. No, not an overstating that that I, in my daily kind of work professional environment, continue to derive from lessons that I learned while being at Pravega. I think that was the most exhilarating work experience for me till now, and it was one where I learned a lot. Like the learning curve was exponential. It was and I continue to think when. So I was the team captain, and we had, I think, at some point about 40 people in the team. I am working now. I don't have 40 people that kind of report to me still. I I can work with sometimes a few interns and other colleagues who are much senior to me. Uh, so there was a different kind of structure, and I continue to learn a lot from that. Uh, I mean, just to give you a few examples, I think Tribhuvan talked really went into the heart of the what ticks the team, and I feel it's understanding of individual, like everyone's individual perspective, desires of what they want out of it, and then kind of aligning that with the goals of the team. And there was this Claude Ruel says, build an A team and C car, and not a C team and an A car, because you can't really do that. And I think that was some of these quotations that we really took them as our kind of guiding light. We're like, yes, the focus is on building the team first. First,
Okay.
do that. And a lot of effort actually went on in that. And we were focusing on training, also a lot of small initiatives. We didn't have a lot of budget at that time. We had some of these resource constraints, knowledge constraints, and which I'm sure you still do. Uh, so we were like, okay, let's. I don't know if you know Ujjwal. Ujjwal was like, he was kind of innovative and always coming up to pushing. Ujjwal and Hagrid. Hagrid is Aditya Sharma. They were always like, oh no, we need to do this. We are too much. We need to push the technology, push the frontier, and we're like, yes, but we don't have the money to do that. So we're like, okay, Ujjwal, you want to use carbon fiber, we don't have the budget, we don't have the knowledge, we are towards mid-season, the car is. What we will do is we will give you 10,000 rupees and you can make a seat out of glass fiber. That's actually how the team started to, for the first time, work with these kind of composite materials. And so Ujjwal and a couple of others, this was, they were like 1 year junior to us at that time. They were like, okay, you go find, we don't know, do it and make the seat. They made a seat. They made a bit of mess in the workshop, but they made a seat, which was the first time that the team kind of used self-made uh, kind of composite material.
Okay.
So that was kind of interesting because you also had to think about the future. And then the next year, when these people were leading the team, they actually went all out and they did a lot of. I think at that time it was still glass fiber stuff, and they gradually moved to some carbon fiber, and now I think like you guys are doing, wow, everything is.
Yeah.
Someone
I
was telling me
mean,
even
I mean,
rims
listening,
are.
yeah, listening to you tell me about the 10,000 rupees sort of budget for getting a glass fiber seat, it sort of makes me feel grateful for what we have, because we
Yeah.
have sponsors who actually give us these materials for free. And I think a lot of people who come into the team might take that for granted, that, okay, fine, this didn't work out, we'll just make another sort of thing from carbon fiber. But I think we can sort of think about how it might be for teams who don't have access to such materials, because
Yeah,
yeah.
I think one important thing that when I was still visiting the IT sometimes, when I was in India, and talk to the teams, I think with Tribhuvan's batch and all, my job was basically to tell a bit of a story of how things started. Not even us, like even before us, and what were the, because I think it's important to recognize where the team is coming from, what were the roots, and some of the problems that we are facing now, because that gives a lot of a sense of, yes, we will overcome this when you face a challenge, because previous teams have gone through similar things and they did something about it, and this is what we are building on to. So this is something that I used to do sometimes, like once or twice that I went there. But it's true, there was, the context was different. uh, we I don't know, it's like shipping is a big problem all the time, and I hope
Always.
it stops being that. But we kind of hired someone and the person said that, sorry, the car cannot be sent because there is some kind of strike or problem happening. And 2 days before the 1 week maybe before the competition, they said, uh, if you have to send it, then you will have to spend a lot more money. I don't know, 6-7 lakh more. And we're like, boss, where is the
Very,
money?
very, very relatable. Very
We
relatable.
we don't have this. Like our account balance for the team is probably now 20,000 rupees because we've spent everything that we could in making this car, and whatever money that we will have to basically each one of us pitch in, and this is one of the objectives that our seniors told us, like, you need to build a team where you can get enough sponsorships that you don't have to ask team members to contribute, but you can pay the team members to do their work. I mean, so I was like, yes, very noble, but sorry, we can't do this now. So those were the kind of challenges, and I mean, these when then eventually one of our team members, Akshay, he went to the port in Chennai. He talked to the IS officer. He said, "Arey, aaj Ganesh Chaturthi hai, ye hai, wo hai." And then he was like, "No, boss." Then I think they were both from Bihar, so he talked a bit in Bhojpuri or something, and they convinced, and they said, "Okay, we will clear the car today." The car was cleared. Then we came to Italy. We was going to get it at the site. Then the shipping agent said, "No, sorry, you can't, because the car there is some problem with ship within Italy transport, and the car is going to arrive in Milan." Then three of us went to Milan, and in Milan they said, "Oh no, the car is not here. It is probably at Fiumicino in Rome." We were like, "What the fuck?" So we were like, "Okay, then we have to go to Fiumicino." Eventually, we found the car in Milan. In Milan, when we found the car, they said, "No trucks are available, so you can't take it." I was like, "No, this is not happening. We need to take this car. Tomorrow the competition is starting." So we contacted here and there, found a truck. They took the truck, then we came back. And on way we got lost. We were three people. We got lost in the mountains in Italy. And then the bus said, "Yeah, there is no way to go to your camp, to the village where we were living. So you can stay the night here in the church." I was like, "What?" This it was like the craziest amount of things that can happen, but it was like, wow, amazing. I think it was these are the things that we always remember. And we used to manufacture the car in Bangalore. One day it turned out that the hub could not take the, what do you call, the spline, and then there's this
Uh, I
the
just want
bearing.
to interject and sort of ask you how this sort of manufacturing plan worked out, where you had to work in Bangalore and then go back to college.
Yeah.
So how did that work
Hmm.
out?
So that was kind of a model which was given to us, and we didn't really innovate a lot on it. In 2012, the entire team moved to Bangalore over the summer to manufacture the car. We hired a shed, which was in it was in Bangalore, in Whitefield, and we all lived there for over the summer months and manufactured the car. And that's so. In the next season, we also kind of decided to do the same, because a lot of our manufacturing, we didn't really manufacture a lot of things in house. We had to get it manufactured in Bangalore, all the CNC work and those kind of things.
Okay.
Those things were not available in Vellore, and we did not have enough technical capacity to use the CNC machines at VIT to manufacture those things. Also, I think at that time VIT also had in that SMB building, ground floor, they had those machines with someone. It was some kind of private university arrangement, something like that.
Okay.
So we used to go to Bangalore and find manufacturers in Pina and basically get all these things done there.
So
Laser cutting
the way it worked was you went to Bangalore during the summers, manufactured the car, and then you brought
Yeah.
it back to Vellore.
Yeah. So there was already, like, it was not that the whole thing was manufactured in Bangalore all the time. We would start going to Bangalore before, and also to Chennai to search for some parts in the automotive markets and all. We would go to Bangalore and find the relevant industry. A lot of that groundwork actually happened in 2012, where our seniors and a lot of peers, they went out to these workshops in Pina and elsewhere in Bangalore and found, okay, we are doing this. Can you give us a budget? Can you give us a discount? We are explaining those things and getting quotes, and then finally giving orders. So a lot of that groundwork had already happened. For instance, even like a small thing like a heat treatment. Now, you need to heat treat your some of your parts like hubs, blah, blah, blah. You can't really sometimes do that in Vellore. You need to get those heat treatment done in Bangalore. So
Yep.
we used to go and find those places. By 2013, we already knew where things were happening. So we knew, okay, this is the place where we can get this done. Also for engine testing and all, we used to work in with I don't remember, with a firm in Bangalore that
So
our previous
so
captain Hemant, he knew, and kind of established the link with Race Dynamics. I don't know.
yeah, Race Dynamics.
Yeah.
So the overall car, when you manufactured it in Bangalore, did you bring it back to VIT to test it, or was it?
Yes. So we brought once the car was manufactured over the summer, then we would bring it to VIT, and then we would start the testing phase and other things which were left to do. And but there was not a lot of time, if I remember, because the competition was in September. So we did some bit of testing on the car. I think we did reasonably good amount of testing, but not. Actually, that was also the first year when the car actually cleared endurance. We didn't get a lot of points and all, but we cleared it. It was kind of a bit of a
Milestone.
Yeah, it was like Vandit, who was our driver, also like powertrain, finance, everything. He was like all over managing. Uh, he got out of the car, and it was a bit like a Kajol Shahrukh Khan scene. I was in the pit, and Vandit and I were running towards each other because it was such an emotional moment, because it was like one full year, almost 2 years of work, because we joined the team before, coming to this, which had never happened before. So that was like, wow, okay. So there were those emotional moments, and there were a lot of things that we missed. Yeah. So we used to move it to Vellore and then work on it in the workshop.
Okay. So I think you haven't. So when was the last time you visited VIT?
I think it would be in 20. I think it was in 2015.
Okay. I think so. Then you would have seen like the new workshop, the bigger workshop, and
Yeah. I've seen the one which is on the boys' hostel side.
Yeah.
Now, we used to be close to SJT. There was like a small place. I don't know what they do with it now, but yeah, I've seen the new workshop.
Right. So yeah, I guess in that aspect, we are quite sort of lucky to actually have our own space to work in, and yeah.
No, that's great. Actually, I love the space and how it was organized, and different teams working together. It's a big space. We didn't have that. I think it was only Pravega which was in one. No, all teams were in that small workshop in SJT, and it was a mess because there was some junk flying here and there, and so yeah, I think the team has progressed a lot. Sometimes now I show my friends, oh, I worked in this team, and then I show them the car which is now. I'm like, see, this is what is the car. We didn't have all the aerodynamics and things like that. So now it looks really good.
Yeah.
So what is your experience now that you also kind of are passing on the baton from to the next year? How was your experience in the team as captain, leader, or as a member?
Right. So for me, I really like the work culture in Pravega. So the disciplinarian work culture. I think I'm not sure if others did, but I was a fan. I was a fan of being punctual, being on time, getting the work done on time, and paying the price if you don't. And I think as a person, I became very disciplined when I got into Pravega. In fact, my CGPA increased after I came into Pravega quite a bit.
Well, generally, it's the opposite.
Yeah. One of the most unique aspects in Pravega is that we don't actually treat it like a project, and it becomes our life, and you sort of understand what it means to work towards something. And we also have some people might consider us to maybe think too highly of ourselves or have this overblown ego, but when we think of competing, we always think of competing with the top teams in the world. We never say, okay, we are an Indian team, we don't have resources, we're going to do this, blah blah. And that culture of sort of not complaining or not being complacent sort of got inculcated into me. And whenever I sort of approach a task, I sort of bring this back into my head that complaining doesn't really do you any good, and you can never move forward. And even in terms of the technical aspect, I think the development in the team has been absolutely astronomical, especially in the composites and the driverless domain. I think one of the huge sort of leaps for the team for the composites part was when we sort of managed to get a sponsor who can actually provide us with the carbon fiber. So now we can we can experiment more freely. not a lot of people know about this, but recently this is still in the works. But recently we managed to manufacture carbon fiber tubes through our own unique method, and when we got it tested,
wow.
yeah, this is still in the works. But when we got it tested, it was in fact stronger than the OEM tubes which we order every year.
Wow. So you order carbon fiber tubes still, but they are like OEM,
Yeah,
and now
so one day we thought, so the carbon fiber tubes are very expensive. So uh, a huge shout out to the composites team of my batch, because they are honestly very creative. They are not afraid to try anything. So yeah. So they had this insane idea, which I can't tell for obvious purposes, but
Oh
they
la
had
la,
this
now you guys have secrets and all.
yeah, so they had this insane idea and they actually executed on it and it actually worked. So now maybe down the line we'll be able to manufacture our own carbon fiber.
I think that is great. I think this kind of some people pushing the team forward in some having some kind of insane ideas. I think this is what really leads to some progress. And it's good to have people who are more like, oh, we need to focus on what the main task first is, and then have some people who will break that mold and say, no, this is nonsense. We need to do this. I'm not satisfied with this. And they will be like arguing and eat your head. No, bhaiya, we need to do this, do this, do this, do this. And they're like, okay, do it. So I think that is great. Would love to see the.
Yeah, I'll definitely share the details with you after this podcast is over.
When you guys have written a paper on it, and yeah,
it'd
be great.
Yeah, and so I was in the aerodynamics department when I joined the team, and so I was very passionate towards aerodynamics. And one of the main things was when I went to FSG, so personally I am a Formula One fan, and when I got to FSG was like heaven for me, because all the judges were Formula One engineers, and I was lost over there. I used to talk to each and every judge, and sometimes maybe too much, but the whole experience was very good in terms of what it actually means to be an engineer. But later on, when I progressed as the team captain, as the CMO, I understood that you shouldn't try to be someone else. So it's very easy to be influenced from the previous captains. It's very easy to do that, and you can't manage everyone the same way. You need to have different management skills for different type of people. For some people, they like to be led, they like to be ordered, or else they can't get the work done. Other people need more creative freedom. They don't like the sort of being confined in a system. So I learned that I sort of got that emotional intelligence as to how you can manage different people and how important empathy is as a skill when you sort of grow up in life.
I think that is great. That this is like I feel I would emphasize a bit more on the point of empathy and understanding people, and it's super important. I feel at some point I had this experience where there was a team member who was working on the technical aspects, but he felt that he was more interested, his long-term objective was more into entrepreneurship and things like that, and he wanted to switch to the marketing side of things. And so we had this chat, and there is this small hill behind the boys hostel side where there's a temple kind of thing.
Correct.
We used to sometimes go on a bit of a team trek, or just some with a few individuals to talk, I said, okay, let's go there and let's talk. And then it was just simple. His motivation was down because he was not feeling comfortable doing what he was doing and how it connected with what he wanted to do. So he said, yes, you move to the marketing team, you do that. And it was absolutely great. He did amazing presentations and amazing ideas and creativity. And so I think it's important skill to listen and not be like, I know this and this is what it is and this is how we'll do it. That's an important lesson that I learned in the team. These are the things that you just explore and you see.
And I think it has been a very sort of interesting conversation so far, because it has actually been a conversation, and I think I really appreciate you for keeping it like that. And personally speaking, I got to learn a lot about the UN, and I understood how much I don't know about a lot of things, which gets me excited to learn about them more. So I'm really grateful for having you on the show. It has been absolutely fantastic.
Me
And
too. It was amazing. I mean, when Tribhuvan reached out and I saw the podcast that you and Tribhuvan did, I was like, oh, this is great. Other seems to be so much in tune. I think you are a great host because you're really, I would personally get lost. I'm like, okay, this question will go okay. But I must congratulate you on that. And I'm sure that you were a great captain. Maybe we can have a feedback session with your team.
definitely.
No, I'm kidding. So thank you so much for having me, and feel free to reach out to anyone in the team who wants to reach out, and more than happy to discuss health in whatever way I can.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adarsh.